Hello, everyone, and welcome to Film Independent Presents, our year-round screening and Q&A series, now virtual. I'm Brian Sheehan with Film Independent. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss all things the Sparks Brothers. First off, I'd like to thank some of our ardent supporters, our lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, and our screening partner, Vision Media. We have a very special guest moderator today in Carrie Brownstein. And during the discussion, if you have any questions for our participants, please use the Q&A button towards the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, I will let Carrie take it away from here.
All right, well, hello, and thank you for having me. I have been tasked with an introduction, which I feel like, I don't know if either the Sparks or Edgar Wright need an introduction, but I will just say that I'm honored to be here, that I am absolutely floored by this film, The Sparks Brothers. I think it's brilliant and delightful and just ineffable in the way that all great art and music should be. It's a 360-degree view of this band, but also somehow leaves portals to the unknown and keeps the mystery alive, which I think is so important for art and the continued conversation we have with it.
Throughout all the years that I've been making music, if you get on a tour bus with a bunch of musicians, eventually the conversation will go to Sparks.
I remember just seeing them all the time, like, who are those guys?
They are a band who you can look up on Wikipedia and know nothing.
We are Sparks, dude.
Please welcome Sparks!
Frequently asked questions about Sparks. How many albums are there?
25 albums.
Are you brothers?
We are brothers.
How did you first meet?
We are brothers.
Music at its best, you hear it and you go, oh my God, what is that?
It's insane, but it's fantastic.
Each time you'd go to the rehearsal, there'd be something new there. Like, that's good.
It wasn't like anything else.
All pop music is rearranged Sparks. That's the truth.
There are throwaway riffs that other bands have built whole careers out of.
One of my favorite moments is John Lennon ringing up Ringo Starr.
You won't believe what's on the television.
It was the sound of the future.
Sparks is way more prolific than all of the artists we consider to be the greatest in the world.
They sort of set a template that a Beatle would pretend to be Ron. That's amazing.
They were taking all their creative juices and putting it into something that they loved.
They were a bit much for most people.
The culture just wasn't there yet.
Is there anybody out there at all right now?
They've reinvented themselves several times.
The thing that marked them was their unwillingness to give up.
That sounds like the scene from our biopic.
Our time has come.
Here we are.
They may have given birth to other bands who don't even know that the lineage goes back to them.
Still are waiting to get paid back for that.
Why have you resisted doing a documentary until now?
We didn't want to do the standard documentary full of talking heads. It would become too dry.
So I'm joined, of course, by the Mael brothers, Russell and Ron, and the director of the Sparks Brothers, Edgar Wright. And we're gonna have a conversation today about this fabulous movie, the Sparks music. I will say I do want to start with, there's this moment, just my own Sparks anecdote of discovering your band, which was, I was in my 20s. And it's a similar story. I think Beck in the movie says something like, on every tour bus, on every tour, that you get to this point in the tour where someone will bring up Sparks, another musician. And this happened to me, and I will name drop Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth, having a barbecue in Portland, Oregon. And I mentioned the band Queen, how much I love them. And he turned to me, he was having another conversation, and he said, Queen, they're just a ripoff of Sparks.
Adelaide, go Thurston.
I'm blushing.
It stung me, because here's this musician who I idolize, and he's telling me that I am missing out on this band that has influenced another band. And I just thought, what is this lack of knowledge in my musical history? And I have spent the last 15 years listening and loving your music, and I know many people have. So anyway, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Great
thank you.
story. Thank you.
Do you still listen to Queen? That's the only question.
No, I had to burn all their records.
Okay,
What
thank you. That answers that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm now qualified to do this. All right, well, starting out with some basic questions, I guess, knowing that Ron and Russ were reticent to make a documentary that that has that way of sort of ossifying an entity, or kind of feeling like, oh, well, here's the this is a memorial. How did you convince them that this should happen? What were those early conversations like?
Well, I guess actually when I asked them, I wasn't aware that they had been they hadn't been reluctant in the past to do a documentary, and I didn't know that they turned down other offers. And I guess in a way, because at the time when I kind of pitched it to them, which was actually at the end of a Sparks gig, and I'll just back up a little. The context of it was that and maybe Carrie, you might have even heard me say it myself, I felt like I'd been just saying out loud, without necessarily thinking it was me, saying that somebody should do a Sparks documentary. And just like anybody that would listen, especially fellow Sparks fans, I'd be saying, somebody should do a documentary about Sparks. They're like the most influential, greatest artists to not have a documentary. And at a Sparks gig, I was with Phil Lord, the director, and I was giving this spiel, and he said, you should make the movie. And then so I said, yeah, I will. And then during the concert, I watched Sparks at the El Rey. I was like thinking about it. And then after the concert, I pitched it to Ron and Russell. And well, they can answer in terms of why they said yes, but I think the biggest part of it was that I was going to cover them as an ongoing concern, because a lot of music documentaries saying, and hey, you remember the 70s? And then 15 minutes spent on the rest of it. So I didn't want to do that, because I was in the sort of belief that the Sparks output of the last 20 years was as good as anything they did in the 70s. And in that sense, there was no golden period for Sparks. It was kind of still going. So that was sort of my pitch, is that it was going to be as much about what's happening now as like, hey, remember the 70s?
And yeah, I mean, and for all of those reasons that Edgar said, we, and for what you said as well, Carrie, about not wanting something to be ossified or, an obituary to a group, and here's your gold watch. Edgar had, we discussed from the beginning, but he had really convinced us that, it was going to be, sort of a thesis of, what Sparks is doing now, all the things that have led up to the present, that there wasn't that golden era like Edgar just mentioned. And, and we were such fans of Edgar's films. So that, I think, is the number one inducement, was that we loved all of Edgar's work, and we thought there was a real connection between what Edgar does with his films and what Sparks does with our music. There's some kind of crossover there. There's Edgar's kinetic style and his use of things like animations within his films, and really importantly, the use of music in most of his films. That's such a key element. So we thought, with all those kind of factors playing into it, that it had to work if there was going to be anybody that could tell our story in a way that we felt was, a visual kind of equivalent to what we do musically, that Edgar was the guy.
Our one fear was just that this would be the one film that didn't have kind of Edgar Wrightness in it, that it would be, just because it was a documentary and he hasn't done a documentary before, that all the things that we loved about Edgar's films wouldn't be present in this film. But we were, I wouldn't say surprised, but we were so pleased when we saw the final cut, because it really feels like an Edgar Wright film, which is, just ideal for us. Yeah,
I would even say it feels like from the first moment of the film, I was I was like, oh, this is such an Edgar movie, but I think it's also an Edgar Wright and Sparks movie. I mean, you guys have used a cinematic language your entire career, and it seems like such a beautiful and explosive fusion of the two. Were there any cinematic precedents for this? Were there films, either narrative or documentary, that you discussed as a group in terms of, we like this, or we definitely don't want to do this?
We didn't really talk too much about, I didn't really talk too much about the style with you guys. I guess there was just things that I had ideas for things, and I just pitched it to Ron and Russel. Like I said, I want to do all the interviews in the same way, because I want to have an equivalence between every interviewee, so that there's no difference between Duran and Julia Marcus, who is a stage invader age 14, but also like to shoot them in the style of the Richard Avedon cover of Big Beat. I thought it would be nice to do and make all of the interviews look sort of timeless, so that then there's so much archive and so much color in the archive. And then I think it was things like just, I guess I pitched some of the ideas of, sometimes they're quite late in the day, like things like the FAQ section, hey, why don't we do like a frequently asked questions bit at the start? And I think I wrote the questions, and you came in the next day with all your witty, pithy answers rehearsed. And then like later there were things like the thing that's in the end credits, I think, because I shot the interviews with Ron and Russel, maybe about like 9 hours of interviews over 4 days, but the 4 days were sort of spread out over the whole process. And very close to the end, I sort of had this idea about, what if we just put out a bunch of bullshit facts in the end credits to keep people guessing? So again, Ron and Russel wrote all of those, but it was this thing of just kind of like floating ideas, like the visual puns and the kind of the questions. But so there was that. And then I guess like style wise, like, I don't know. I mean, I do watch a lot of music documentaries. I guess one documentary maker that I really enjoy what he's done is Julian Temple. Like, I love the Filth and the Fury documentary because I thought the way he used archive to give context was really great. And in this movie, because we're covering, unlike a lot of music documentaries, we're covering a bigger span of time than most music documentaries. It was a gift in a way, because not only is there tons of amazing Sparks archive, but you end up going on a journey through pop culture at the same time. So, it was a sort of a big sort of Herculean task to wrangle it all, but it was never, you were never short of like ideas or things to go to, which was, a gift, And
was there anything that you, in early cuts, I assume that Ron and Russell saw, or Edgar, as you would conduct other interviews or discover things in the research, that adjusted your questions? Like, do you have to go back and interview anyone or interview the band because you thought, this thing has been unearthed, this discovery has happened, and now we need to dive in? Or did that happen at all?
I think at the very end, the last thing I did with you guys interviewing you in the studio was I did like a sort of solo interview. I mean, I guess that's one of the things. I didn't really think that it would be so kind of unique, but then I shot Ron and Russell in 2-shot for the entire film, because I've rarely met Ron and Russell separately. So in my head, it's like, it's not like you're kind of a two-headed monster, but in my head, it's like you come as a pair and I'll interview you as a pair. But then at the end, it was like, I want to do 90 minutes with both of you separately. And in that part, which we did last, I had interviewed some of the other people. So I had questions and things that they had said that I could ask Ron and Russell about. I guess the one thing that did change things, and like, thank God it happened on all levels, is that when we went into production on the documentary, the Leos Carax film Annette, which Ron and Russell wrote, wasn't definitely happening. It was sort of maybe happening, but it had not been green lit. And then I think by the time we finished shooting the documentary, and then I was making my next film, Last Night in Soho, during that time, Annette was green lit. And so as soon as I heard that was happening, I said to my producer, I said, we have to go to the set of Annette. And in fact, that was the last bit of filming I did with Ron and Russell. And indeed, the last time I saw them in person as well, because of know if you heard about the pandemic, but like we've all been in different countries. so I guess that's that thing is if like, I mean, listen, I can say this on camera. I've seen Annette and it's stunning and I cannot wait for you all to see it. But I also just on a purely selfish level, I'm really glad that it got greenlit so that my B plot in the movie would have a happy ending.
Ron and Russell, was there anything as you started to embrace the idea of doing this documentary that you felt like was off limits, that you were unwilling or hesitant to explore at all?
Well, in a certain way, it's more like we were worried that there wasn't enough to explore, that what we do as a band and just the visuals live and on album artwork and those sorts of things was more interesting than, you know, some deep dark secret which we're not really aware of. And so you know, but Edgar assured us at the beginning, don't worry, it'll be, you know, when you see the documentary, you'll be interesting. And so that, you know, that was an important thing for us, because, you know, it was one reason why we never wanted a documentary. We always felt that what we were doing as a band was saying everything that needed to be said about our sensibilities or even us personally. But you know, that we can see that there was a way to frame a documentary where things could be kind of rounded off a little more and still work, because we don't have those kind of little extra moments like, you know, drug overdoses and kind of introspective rebounds and divorces and all these sorts of things. They kind of make other music documentaries maybe a little more spicy, but we shouldn't have worried that if it got taken care of by just brilliant filmmaking.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think that was, I mean, that just happens to be your story, that it lacks, you know, the kind of, I guess, cliches, but also some of the tropes of, you know, the life of a rock band. But I felt that way I could just immerse into the art, you know, that there was something so pure about it. In terms of,
go ahead. No, I was just going to add that what you just said is I felt that way in terms of with Ron and Russell's concern. I think maybe Russell, you said in jest at some point that there was no kind of not enough soap opera, you know, but I was on the flip side of saying every other music documentary has that, and every other music documentary is the rise and fall and rise. And to me, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Carrie, is it's a testament to dedication to the craft, and that alone in this especially in this current climate with musicians having it harder than ever before, just to sort of see Ron and Russell figure out a way to make it work for them, I think it's just so inspiring, because like I hope I'm doing work as good as them, you know, like as they are now. It's incredible. It's just like, I just feel it's that it becomes, in that sense of like what might seem like a monastic approach to being a band, to me is just like the persistence of vision. And I feel like sometimes with bands, like sometimes there's like true tragedy, and sometimes there's things where you feel like people have squandered what they have, and you sort of don't really have any sympathy for like people who kind of just like blow all their money up the wall and just kind of like, just, you know, self-destructive in a way that like you can't sort of sympathize with. And to see on the flip side, people like work really, really hard for 50 years is sort of extraordinary.
For sure. So Ron, you said that, you know, one thing was wanting, that you've always felt like the work speaks for itself, which I think is true, but yet watching the film back and knowing that the messages were always merged with the art itself, did either of you have any moments of reassessment or seeing something in your past albums or visuals that you hadn't thought about before? Was there any sense of contemplation or enlightenment there, or I don't know, just, yeah.
I think just the idea that other people have scrutinized us so deeply along the way was, you know, maybe I shouldn't be surprised in some sense, but you know, we kind of that kind of depth and breadth of scrutiny in a good sense, an analysis of what we've done, we never realized that, and kind of maybe it's just partially ego stroking or something like that, but to see that and kind of all contained within the documentary, we're semi-aware of where we stand in the overall picture, but it was really inspiring to us to have that level of depth of insight into what we were doing, sometimes much more than we would have about what we're doing, and from people that are from all different areas of the arts, writers and comedians and actors, and also musicians from all different fields. So that was a surprise, at least to me.
It was really amazing to see just even, writers like Neil Gaiman, but discussing theories about the album covers of ours, like the propaganda cover, exactly what was going on, what was behind the kidnapping scene that's going on there and stuff. And so to know that even album covers were getting this kind of attention and scrutiny by writers that we respect was, it was really amazing. And just a credit to Edgar for having reached out to this broad group of creative types, and that, them agreeing to participate in this was something for us that was just so heartwarming.
Yeah, I loved all the commentary, and I do love, Edgar, that you posited them in the same kind of monolithic space. I think just visually it really worked, but it also it helped with the kind of, I don't know, I guess also how I think of the Sparks as monolithic. It's just like it's a world that is very intentional and fully formed. So I love that merging there. In terms of collaboration, Russell and Ron, I mean, what do you think is like, what makes a good collaborator? Why are you guys good collaborators?
Well, I mean, I think in our case, being brothers actually is the reason it's working and has worked for so long, contrary to all the other brothers acts that can't stand each other and, are really at odds with each other. And for us, it's kind of been just the opposite, that we kind of have this vocative in various ways, within the confines of pop music. And so I think if we hadn't been brothers, the collaborative side of things would have probably fallen apart, ages and ages ago. And so I think that's been the constant throughout this. And we kind of don't have to ever talk about philosophies of music or our music or where we're headed. We just kind of have a sense for it. And we can also, in our case, kind of not worry about doing something foolish in the studio. We have a studio in my place now. And if we do something and try something and it's really ridiculous and it doesn't pan out well, no one will ever hear it except the two of us, and we don't care what the other thinks. We won't in that kind of way. And so it's probably the best situation in our case. Obviously, it's unique because there's more of the other brothers acts where it's not working out that way for whatever reasons.
For sure. Edgar, do you feel like, what is the difference in terms of the collaborative process in working on narrative versus documentary? Because obviously with documentary, you're collaborating with subjects, and in this case, subjects who are very much alive and who you respect. And, so I'm just curious how that collaborative process, filmmaking obviously is from already, but how this differed.
Well, I guess, making a narrative film, you have something in your head and you're trying to sort of bring that to your screen. So usually like you're against yourself all the time. And usually whenever you're like disappointed with something, it's like, because it doesn't look or sound like it did in your head. And it's like, how can I make it more like the thing that I dreamt about? In this case, like tackling their life and their work, it's more about finding ways to sort of present it in a way and also respect it, but also tell the story. So I mean, I think the thing with, and having known them a couple of years before I even asked them about the documentary, I knew that we had a shared sense of humor, and I guess in like in that way that, I mean, but then in a strange way, part of my sense of humor is growing up listening to Sparks. So I feel like it was kind of destined to be at a certain point.
Rip off.
But it is that thing where you sort of, I mean, it is the nicest thing about like, they say don't meet your heroes, but this is a sort of glorious exception to that. And I think weirdly, like when we like met, aside from me asking all my geeky fan questions, like we would sort of just talk about films and like comedy and art and, and so I knew that we had a shared sensibility. And so that kind of gave me license to sort of know what Ron and Russell's sense of humor was, which is obviously very evident in the work and the stagecraft and the videos and the album covers, to sort of how to present the documentary. And I think the key thing is similar to what Ron says in the film about Jean-Luc Godard, is, talking about the French New Wave, that Jean-Luc Godard would make movies and comment on them at the same time. And I think what Sparks do brilliantly is like really serious about and passionate about their songcraft, and the emotions in the song are very real, but it doesn't stop them from having fun with the form. And so I sort of decided to approach the documentary in the same way, is that I'm really serious and passionate about Sparks, but that's not going to stop me from like having a little fun with them and sort of taking the piss out of the music documentary at the same time, even though I love music documentaries. So it was sort of a gift in a way to sort of be able to have that tone, and it, because, they're not a po-faced band, and that's a gift. It's said in the documentary quite a few times by people saying that like having humor and music together is something that's a challenge for some audiences. But to me, it's like, it's why they're memorable. And also in terms of making the documentary, it was such a kind of like a pleasure to be able to have a little fun with it along the way.
To show we're on the same wavelength too. And just the brief anecdote, and I won't get bogged down, but Edgar, he, in the documentary, showed this little snippet of a film that I did at UCLA Film School when I was starting. It's not a good film, but it was sort of a little homage or a ripoff of trying to be a French New Wave film. And so found out after talking about that, Edgar had done the exact film, not the exact but he had done his little homage to French New Wave film, kind of taking the piss in a certain way too, and his was
basically identical shorts shot like 30 years apart. It's really strange.
This needs to be bonus content. I mean, we've seen Russell's, but we need you to release yours, Edgar.
we literally make the same joke in both things. It's like the actor in yours is like Earl Mankey, and you call him Jean-Paul Mankey. And then my friend whose name was Phil, it was like Jean Phil, like, but also like Russell's one was called Trade Serious, and my one was called Brainless, a Buddha Lemon Souffle. And it's basically the same short, like made at college. It's kind of crazy.
So you guys are having this moment now, but in a 50-year career, there are so many moments. When you're looking back, which I suppose this film forces you to do you have a sense that you were enjoying those moments, even the ebbs and flows, like as you're watching footage of yourself? Do you enjoy things now? Are you able to sort of exist with a sense of gratitude now in a way that you weren't then, or have you always felt present in the many vicissitudes of this band?
Well, I probably enjoyed the flows a little more than the ebbs, I guess. but when you're involved in the thing, we're kind of always, I mean, I suppose there is a moment where you try to relish something that's positive, but we're always kind of trying to move on to the next thing, because I'm always nervous that, well, is there anything else that I'll be able to come up with? I mean, I know we have 25 albums, but that fear is there all the time. And so I guess I'm not able to kind of cherish those moments as much as I should, because I'm worried about, well, what if I don't come up with another song? I don't want to live on memories, So there is that. But I mean, the times where something has happened, I mean, there have been surprises, like when we had the first two albums out in the States that did nothing in the early 70s, and then Island Records brought us to the UK and to reform a band, and then we had this immediate kind of success. You kind of think, wow, this is unbelievable. You're kind of seeing yourself in this situation, because we'd always dreamed to be a big British band, and here we were. But it kind of didn't last for very long, because then, it's like, okay, you need to come up with another album, and then you're on to kind of just the actual kind of work of doing it. So I suppose, the documentary was a moment to kind of look at those things, and at least for 2 hours and 20 minutes of my life, and just say, that was pretty special, both the good things and the bad things.
And also just the kind of early feedback we've gotten from people who have seen the film at festivals and stuff. It's been really inspiring to us too, to hear from a lot of really young people saying that the story has been inspirational for them as creative types, and that it gives them kind of some validation to just also follow their own, their own path, and to retain their own integrity in whatever they're doing creatively. And as a kind of a byproduct of the film, which we didn't think that there would be that kind of inspirational side to other people, to other young people and creative types, to kind of just stick with your own vision and have blinders on and don't worry what anybody else says about your creative pursuits. That's been also inspiring to us as a result of the documentary. So that it's been really, really cool.
Well, I can definitely second that as a takeaway from the film. And I'll end. We're going to move over to audience Q&A for the last 15. But I guess my last question is to Edgar, and it kind of plays off what both Ron and Russell were just talking about. What have Sparks and this film taught you as an artist about perseverance and longevity and willingness to take risks?
Well, I guess it's just a sort of validation of what, you feel deep down, is that sort of like you've always got to bet on yourself, and you've always got to stick to your guns in terms of artistic integrity, because the worst thing that can happen is that you have a failure with something that you weren't sure about yourself. And then even if you have a big success with something that you weren't sure about, it will haunt you, because you're thinking, I don't really like it. But I think what Sparks have done, here's the answer, is that what Sparks have done throughout their career is that they've owned their successes and failures. And I don't think there's any of the albums that you aren't in proud of, in a way. And that's a really beautiful place to be, because at the end of the day, and especially now, that's the nice thing about this documentary, is that people have nice things to say about all the albums. And I know Ron and Russell was sort of floored by Flea talking about introducing Sparks, one of the albums that didn't really do anything at the time, but talking about that one at length and knowing that one off by heart. So I think that's the thing, is that as long as you can be, kind of sort of be proud of your successes and failures, that's a good place to be.
Yeah. We've seen last night in Soho, so we don't need to give Edgar any lessons in daring. It's there.
All right. Well, I'm excited for that one as well. And thank you. Thanks for answering my questions. I am going to move on to some audience questions. So this is from Mitch. He says, I'd love to learn about your film journey that led to the upcoming Annette. Have you always written screenplays as well? And is your approach to writing a screenplay the same as approaching a new album?
No, I mean, we actually our passions within film now, if they're, it is more in doing movie musical projects, because we feel that that sort of is where we have some unique kind of stance on how movie musicals can be done. And as a result of Annette, which was going to be Sparks' next album 8 years ago, it's a narrative project, but then through a long circuitous path, we met up with the French director Léos Carax. He liked the project and he wanted to direct it as a movie. So that kind of was how that project, kind of the journey that it took. And so if there's something, that we have as a passion within film now, I think it's doing movie musical projects. We have another one that we're working on now so yeah, rather than just screenplays for dramatic films where there's a lot better people doing those than us, and even doing film, just composing for films, just scores. We feel there's a lot of really talented people doing that really well, but where we have a kind of a unique take on things would be with movie musicals. So that's kind of what our passion is now, apart from Sparks.
I mean, just in a technical way, for many years there wasn't really a screenplay for Annette. It was kind of having to do it after the fact because there needed to be a screenplay written. But for us, it was just a treatment, and then songs and musical expressions within a narrative framework. And then at the end, we were told in a technical sense there had to be a screenplay, so that was kind of tacked on.
Did you have to learn Final Draft, or did you write it out? And
I just
still don't have it.
No, I let somebody who knows how to do that do that.
Fair enough.
Post-it notes.
Yes, that's great for someone to have to transcribe it. So the film is 2 hours and 20 minutes, which, by the way, flew by. And like I said, I watched it, I think, 2 times consecutively. So, but Chris asks, were there any scenes that you had to cut out due to time that you regret or wish you could have kept in?
I mean, there's lots of stuff. I mean, there's a certain point where you just have to make choices of what you want to put in. I mean, there was interestingly, there was a shorter cut at one point, a little bit shorter. And I showed it to a director friend and he said, I have one note, and it was a good one. He goes, I want to hear the songs a bit more. And I said, you're so right. You're so right. Because I think there's so many music documentaries that assume prior knowledge by the viewer. And sometimes even really good ones don't let people in who don't know the artist. And with Sparks, it was obviously incredibly important to make it as much an introduction as a celebration. So I did that, and I probably added about 5 minutes to the length of the movie just by, let's just hear more of this song and more of this song and more of this song. But it was the right thing to do. I mean, there were things that we shot which kind of, once we'd established the momentum of the film, that they were really sweet, but they just didn't fit. Where we did quite a lot of on-location stuff that were really sweet little vignettes, and they're all going to be on the Blu-ray. We've just been working on that at the moment, where the Blu-ray, I think, for Sparks fans and fans of the movie is going to be quite something, because it has an entire concert that I shot. I shot the live concert, so there's like a 90-minute concert, which is great. And then there's these other bits, mostly these things like raw interviews or longer stories that you can't really stop for somebody's 5-minute story, or like little vignettes where we were on location. So some really sweet things, like with Ron and Russel going back to the first place they played a gig. But once we tried to put those into the edit, it always felt like a different kind of movie. It felt like, like an episode of Arena or something in a completely nice way. But it didn't fit what we'd sort of established with the kind of the oral history, sort of the momentum of that. So those bits will be on the Blu-ray, and I think they're all at work as nice little short featurettes in their own right.
Amazing. All right, so a different kind of movie here, but Sparks, if they ever made a biopic about you, are there any actors you have in mind who could portray you?
Yeah. You go first.
Oh yeah. Well, I first of all, I really don't want a biopic made. Everything becomes then overly dramatic out of necessity and all. But I'll go with Benedict Cumberbatch. And
Oh, damn, he was playing me.
oh, he was. Wait, in a dual role. Benedict
Dual role. Both
dual role.
Yeah.
Like the Winklevoss twins. Yeah.
Yeah.
I go for a bolder idea. Muppets. Muppet Ron and Russell.
Okay.
And then you do the voices, but it's essentially puppets.
All right. I greenlit.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Now
just
you
got
wanna- now
greenlit.
you want to see that? You want to see that film now?
Absolutely.
I want to see both. How about 2 docu-pics? One with Benedict Cumberbatch in both roles, and then the Muppets in the other one.
Yeah, it was
The same
split,
day.
split screen, no, doing the same thing on opposite sides of the screen. Yes.
Good idea.
All right, Edgar, this is from Marla. How did you decide who to include among the talking heads, and how did you find them? Because some seem a bit random, like Patton Oswalt, and others seem perhaps hard to locate, like some of the fans. So what was that process like?
Well, I think I don't think Patton is that random in the sense of like unsurprisingly, a lot of comedians are fans of Sparks, and like that completely tracks. And in terms of like defining the people, it was like there were like 3 elements to it. There were people that Ron and Russell had worked with and grown up with. Then there were people who were already like noted fans, like Thurston Moore, who you like your friend from the barbecue. Like, so Thurston is on record as being a Sparks fan. So were like Duran, so in New Order, Vince Clarke. So those people we just wanted to track down because we knew they loved the band. And then the third sort of wild card was more people that I assumed that they liked Sparks, and 4 out of 5 times I was right. And so in a weird way, that's how I found the random people, because I would say to people like your good friend Fred Armisen, Mike Myers, Neil Gaiman, Patton Oswalt, Scott Aukerman, say a Beck Flea. I'd say, you must be a Sparks fan, right? Oh, I love Sparks. And that's how a lot of those came together. But I do think like, and what's interesting about people as well, I didn't think nobody's experience of the band was wrong, as in there wasn't like a minimum requirement of knowledge. One of the things about Sparks, and this is interesting about Patton, I asked him if he loved Sparks, and he goes, Angst in My Pants is one of my favorite albums, but he didn't necessarily know a lot of the other ones. He was just like laser focused on that one. And then when I asked him to be in the documentary, then he like really quickly like genned up, and he goes, okay, now I know everything. So, but like just because somebody just knows one album, does that mean that they're like not equipped to talk about it? No, it's like that's what's great about, I mean, we all know what it was like pre-internet, where you could just be obsessed by one album because it was the only album that was in the library, or it was the only album that was in the record store. Like people are like spoiled these days by having an entire discography laid out on the internet, because that wasn't the case. That you would have to kind of like just get obsessed by different things. So in that sense, I was well aware, and why sometimes some of the commentators seemed kind of not random, but from different walks of life. I just thought it was a nice way to show the massive cultural footprint that Sparks have.
For sure. All right, this is from Rick. I loved the early family stories and growing up in Los Angeles. Did your mother or family get to see your success, or were they supportive of your artistic journey?
Well, our father unfortunately didn't get to see it, but our mother did. She was a massive Sparks fan, #1, and she was always slightly reticent about us pursuing a career in evil rock and roll, because she said, oh, you're a college educated guys with degrees, and you could get a real job. And then once she saw us on Top of the Pops, she said, there's my boys. Told you they'd amount to something good. So she couldn't have been prouder. And so she was, huge fan.
Right. How did you survive the 6-year period from 88 to 94 when you didn't release music? Did you ever want to give up or go through periods when you stopped making music?
Well, that period we were actually, we were working all the time, and that was, we were working on the Psychic Girl project, and it's discussed a bit in the documentary. And if there was one regret, maybe, was that we put all our eggs into the Tim Burton basket, as it were, at the time. And Tim was really passionate about the project. My the Psychic Girl was another movie musical based on a Japanese manga. And so unfortunately, after a rewrite that he requested from the screenwriter, he went on to some other project. It's been kind of lingering in his his stack of to-do projects. And in any case, so we were still active, incredibly active, and it was just that the public didn't see the fruits of any of that work that we were doing that during that whole period.
We learned the one lesson. I mean, just Russell referred to it, just that despite any excitement that we have working on a film project or any other kind of non-album project, it's really important for us to continue working on the one thing that we can control, which is a Sparks album. So that's always got to be side by side. I mean, to say it's a backup is kind of diminishing what it is, but just to kind of have something that that you can do and that you can control.
Sure. I mean, it is an embarrassment of riches, but I mean, and we're so lucky as fans that right now, I mean, especially with film, it can be so slow or cumbersome and often never comes to fruition. The fact that we have this documentary, we have Annette, we have Edgar's upcoming film. In addition to this one, like, it's wonderful for all three of you. So I'll end with, because I think we're at the end, time-wise, what is next for Sparks music-wise? Will you be on tour? And then I'll throw that to you as well, Edgar, and what's next for you? So
we're in the midst of a new album, and we'll be touring. We had 2 tours postponed because of the pandemic, but we'll be touring North America, 17 shows starting in February, and it'll be launched with a big show at the Disney Hall in Los Angeles. I think it's February 8th. So, but that's the start of a North American tour, and then we go to Europe, and and then Annette coming out in the summer, opening Cannes Film Festival. So we'll see where that all leads to.
So cool. Edgar, last night in Soho, and then
I just like the casual opening the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That old thing.
So,
you get the whole opening the Cannes Film Festival thing, no big deal.
So many film commitments.
I am promoting this movie, and we're going to carry on promoting it in Europe. And then I have my film Last Night in Soho coming out in late October. And then I have various things in development and I've been writing, but I don't honestly know what exactly the next thing is. And hopefully by the time I finish doing the Soho press, it will become clear to me what the next one is. So TBD.
Right. Well, I do sort of hate that question. I apologize, because I feel like that we always want to seem like we're working on 20 things. Like there's just this pressure to say, but really the reality is that you guys are successful and inspirational because you work really hard on a singular thing and focus and put all your heart and soul into it. So I want to thank each of you for continually doing that kind of work and for inspiring us and for making a great film, and Sparks for being one of the greatest bands of all time. So
thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks for everyone who tuned in today.
Yeah.
And I guess we're at the end, and we will say farewell.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Carrie.